Peter Abernathy is the first host we see glitch or break free from his programming in Westworld. He's the first we hear say, "These violent delights have violent ends." And he's the host Charlotte Hale chooses to upload 35 years of data into. So what's going on with Peter Abernathy? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. This video is brought to you with the support of my brilliant Patreon community. Please do check out the link to my Patreon page if you're interested in joining up for some exclusive audio content. And do consider subscribing here if you enjoy the video. Oh, and there will be spoilers here if you haven't watched Season 1 or the Season 2 trailers yet. Peter Abernathy, Dolores' father, only has a few minutes of actual screen time in Season 1 of Westworld, and yet he is very important to the plot. I'd go as far as to say that if we really understand what was going on with him, then we understand a lot about how Ford manipulated so much of what happened in Season 1, and what will drive a lot of what Delos will be up to in Season 2. So, let's have a look at what did happen to him. But first, a little bit of backstory. The host we know of as Peter Abernathy wasn't always that character. He's one of the oldest hosts, and had previously been a cult leader called the Professor, who liked to quote Shakespeare, as well as other literary luminaries, but Ford moved him to become Dolores' father. Those memories are still with him, although normally he wouldn't be able to access them. So far, there's nothing particularly out of the ordinary here. We've seen plenty of hosts changed from character to character and moved from plotline to plotline. But then, he is one of the hosts that gets the Reveries update, and he sees the anachronistic photograph of William's fiancée, and it seems to send him into some sort of meltdown. And I'd like to suggest to you that all of this was exactly what Ford was wanting to happen. So let's break this down. The Reveries update was intended, or at least it was explained as being intended as a way for hosts to access old experiences without remembering them. They could import mannerisms or expressions from previous experiences and incorporate them into their current programming. We see Clementine importing a gesture from a previous experience, for example. So Abernathy's whispering of "these violent delights have violent ends" to Dolores seems on the surface of it to be a mannerism dredged up through the Reveries upgrade, something Ford will have known could or would have happened. And the trigger seems to have been the photograph. Now, we assume that the photograph was a trigger for him because it was anachronistic in Westworld, with the modern clothes and Times Square in the background, and indeed he initially seems to be asking where the person in the photo could possibly be. But when hosts see anachronistic things, they have a default response of, "That doesn't look like anything to me." It's what Dolores says when she sees the photo. No, there's something else going on here. And given its link to the Reveries, my best guess is that the thing that Abernathy thinks is wrong in the photo is that he has seen the person before, or perhaps seen modern technology before, but in a different life. And given that he is a very old host, and we know that some of the older hosts at least used to be used front of house or outside of Westworld itself. Remember Angela greeting William before he entered Westworld in the old timeline in Season 1. Perhaps Peter was one of these too. And perhaps he even met the woman in the photograph, who is, let's not forget, William's fiancée and soon-to-be wife, so will have almost certainly been around the company and the park for quite a few years. So the photograph, combined with the Reveries update, connected him to a previous life, and triggered him to collect some mannerisms from the Shakespeare-quoting professor. So, quoting Shakespeare as a way of expressing his inexpressible thoughts. Now, Remember, he has been conveniently moved to a place where one of the only people he seems to definitely meet every day is Dolores. And Dolores, we know, can be triggered by the audio command and quote from Romeo and Juliet, "These violent delights have violent ends." Abernathy says it to her, and she in turn says it to Maeve, and from this apparently innocent start of a man discovering a photograph, Ford's main two tools, Dolores, who he will coax to full self-awareness and who will lead the host uprising, and Maeve, who will take out the Delos staff underground, allowing his ambush to work, are underway. In other words, Ford used Abernathy to launch his whole plan. But he wasn't finished with him then. Abernathy got recalled because of the glitch, and then seems to slip straight into his cult leader persona, meaning that he clearly can't go back into circulation, so everyone agrees that he should be lobotomized and sent into cold storage. But again, this seems to have been exactly what Ford wanted. As Abernathy goes off, Bernard, working for Ford, whispers in his ear, "Goodbye, old friend. For now." Which implies that the plan is for them to meet again, or that there is something else that Abernathy needs to do. But what could Ford possibly want from a lobotomized host in cold storage? Well, first of all, we need to stop thinking of those hosts as having been lobotomized. Bernard actually corrects this misconception in Season 1, saying that what happens is more like being hobbled. Now, hobbling a horse, say, is a rather cruel practice of tying its legs together so that it can't stray or do all of the things it might otherwise do. Its personality and memories are still there. So Abernathy is not mindless. He can still be programmed to do stuff or enact program he already had. And so the hobbled Abernathy is left unsupervised in cold storage with all of the other unused hosts. And the next time we see them all in action, including Clementine incidentally, is when Ford springs his trap. This is the host army that he uses in the season finale. Surely, like when he used Abernathy to trigger Dolores and then Maeve at the start of his plan, he used him again to trigger all of the hobbled hosts in cold storage at the end of the plan. When you think about it, it is actually the most logical reason for why Ford wanted Abernathy down there. So, Abernathy was central to all that happened in Season 1. Ford used him to start his plan by triggering Dolores and then Maeve, and he used him to end it by mobilizing the host army. But of course, something else happened to Abernathy in Season 1 that will have huge implications for his role in Season 2. Charlotte Hale, who had been trying to get decades of coding and user data out of Westworld, I did a whole video on this if you're interested, picks Abernathy to be the host that she uploads this data to in order to get it out of Westworld. Now, it's important to note here that this data is the most important thing for Delos in the entire park. Indeed, she says several times, in several different ways, that the park is actually a front, or a bit of a distraction from this main task of getting the data. Charlotte isn't just a random Delos employee, she's the executive director of a multi-billion-dollar organization, and she appears to be spending 100% of her time trying to get this data out of Westworld. It is the most important thing to Delos, and it is now in Abernathy's head. The plan appears to have been for Lee Sizemore to give Abernathy just enough personality to make him appear human and get him out of the park. But when Lee goes to find Abernathy to upload this personality, Abernathy is gone. We are left to assume that he is part of the host army up on Westworld. He is free in Westworld, with no clear uploaded personality and a head full of extremely valuable data that Delos will quite literally kill to get their hands on. At which point we get to what is going to happen to him in Season 2. First, given all this, we know that Delos, and Charlotte in particular, will be focused on getting that data, which means tracking down Peter Abernathy and getting him out of the park. If this wasn't already obvious, we also have this snapshot from the Season 2 promotional material, which seems to be evidence of Charlotte Hale, or someone pretending to be Charlotte Hale, trying to find Peter Abernathy. So, once Charlotte herself has escaped from Dolores' insurrection above ground and rescued as many board members as she can, the priority will be finding Peter Abernathy. And there is one more hint about Season 2. We have this shot of him being held down in a lab by what looks like security. This might mean that Delos do capture him, although I say might, because if you look over his shoulder you see someone who looks a lot like the younger Ford we saw briefly in Season 1. Could this be a hint that we will see Abernathy in 2 different timelines in Season 2? We will surely see him without much of a personality, or with many personalities, loose in Westworld in the current timeline. But could we also see him when he was a newly created host, at the very genesis of Ford's plan to eventually help the hosts to self-awareness? It's possible. Or perhaps it's just him as the Professor, fighting against his reprogramming. We'll have to wait to see. What do you think Peter Abernathy's role in Season 2 will be? Let me know in the comments below. If you're interested in supporting in Deep Geek or getting access to some exclusive audio content I have recorded for my patrons, please visit my Patreon page. And don't forget to subscribe here. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.